The story begins in a beautiful city filled with tall buildings that shine under the sun and a welcoming atmosphere that invites you to stroll through its streets. Within that city, in a particular house, someone was busy with their daily tasks. In the kitchen of that house, a maid was meticulously preparing the meal with dedication and care. Her expression showed the concentration with which she worked. The maid began cutting the vegetables, selecting each one with precision, and preparing all the necessary ingredients to craft an exquisite dish. She grabbed a ladle and prepared to taste the seasoning of the soup bubbling in the pot. Upon tasting a bit, her face showed a slight grimace of displeasure. It seemed the meal was missing something essential, perhaps a touch of salt or some spice. She quickly turned and called her daughter's name with a firm but loving voice. In the background, a blonde girl with a muscular body shaped by exercise was lifting weights, focused on her workout routine. The blonde girl's name was Nayeon, and at that moment, she was sweating from the effort of her morning exercises. Her daily routine included weightlifting and stretching, demonstrating her dedication to staying in shape. "Can you go wake up your oppa?" asked the maid, the tone that mixed love and authority. Nayeon, hearing her mother's request, merely glanced over, showing a slight expression of resignation. A while later, Nayeon entered a room with a completely happy smile, enthusiastically exclaiming that it was time to wake up. Upon entering, she noticed something that surprised her. There was a boy sleeping at the desk with books and notebooks scattered around him, the result of an intense night of studying. That boy's name was Yong. Nayeon carefully observed Yong, noticing the details of his calm and relaxed face as he slept. In her mind, she couldn't help but think how cute he looked when he was sleeping, a thought she couldn't avoid. Apparently, she didn't want to interrupt his sleep and just kept watching him, with a mixture of tenderness and admiration, enjoying that moment of tranquility before the day began for both of them. Suddenly, Nayeon approached carefully, moving with the same subtlety as a cat, and began touching Jong's back. The soft touch of her fingers on his skin provoked a reaction in her own body, making her face turn a deep shade of red as strange feelings welled up inside her. Nayeon continued to touch his back delicately, and feeling braver, she slightly moved her hand to caress Yong's face. The texture of his skin and the stillness of his sleeping expression fascinated her, creating a silent connection between the two. The silence enveloped the entire room, wrapping the atmosphere in an almost magical calm, and Nayeon, still blushing, continued to watch her oppa's face closely. But suddenly, her expression changed, and with a determined gesture, she grabbed his cheek tightly and told him in a firm tone to wake up, reminding him it was time to go to school. They began arguing loudly, their raised voices filling the space, and the sounds could be heard all the way to the kitchen where the maid was. Yong, the protagonist, was upset because the abrupt wake-up had caused him to cramp up in his legs, making him writhe in pain as he tried to get up. Nayeon turned around with a playful smile and asked, "What do you think of my new leggings? Do you like them?" The unexpected question left the protagonist momentarily stunned, not knowing what to respond. However, regaining his composure with a confident move, he gave her a slap on the butt and with a mischievous smile told her they looked very nice and that they should go eat. Nayeon hadn't expected that kind of response, and she could only feel her body tingle from the unexpected gesture. Both of them came down from the room with renewed energy. Yong was ahead, while Nayeon followed closely, their footsteps lightly echoing on the stairs. Upon reaching the kitchen, the maid greeted them with a warm smile and asked, "Did you wake up, Yong?" Still a bit drowsy, he first said good morning, and then asked if they had slept well. The maid, hearing the concern in Yong's voice, only managed to look at him with love and a slight blush on her cheeks. With a soft but cheerful voice, the maid told them she had made silver miso soup for breakfast, a specialty that always managed to cheer everyone up in the house. The protagonist was very happy to hear this, knowing that silver miso soup was one of his favorite meals. It had been a year since Yong started living in that house. As he prepared for the day, he began to recall what his life had been like before moving. He remembered being in his old home, eagerly awaiting the results of his university exam. Suddenly, with a shout of joy, he announced that he had been accepted into a prestigious university in Seoul. His mother and sisters quickly approached to congratulate him, while he, with a big smile, told them he had earned second place in the exam and also a full scholarship. He proudly added that he had finally fulfilled his promise of moving to Seoul and studying at one of the best universities in the country. However, Jong's mother, worried, exclaimed that the family's financial situation wasn't very good and that they wouldn't be able to afford his stay in Seoul. Despite the warning, Yong, full of excitement and enthusiasm, didn't listen to those words. He was determined to take advantage of the opportunity he had worked so hard to earn. Several days passed, and Yong was finally in Seoul. He was fascinated and amazed to be in such a big city for the first time. As he explored his new surroundings, a beautiful, voluptuous woman accompanied by her daughter, who also had attractive curves, arrived to pick him up. Yong watched them curiously, not entirely understanding what was happening. Just then, Yong's phone rang. It was a call from his mother. With a worried voice, she told him that Seoul was a very big and scary city, and that it would be difficult for him to live alone. She suggested he contact her friend Yuna, who lived nearby and had shared many moments of his childhood, to see if she could take him in. A little embarrassed by the sudden situation, Yong turned around and, with some shyness, asked the women if they had met when he was a child. The women, without saying a word, stared at him with looks full of memories and nostalgia. He observed them carefully, trying to remember some detail. Suddenly, his memory began to clear, and he managed to recall that when he was a child, he had visited Seoul and was warmly welcomed by his mother's friend. That visit left a warm and lasting impression on his mind. The maid, always practical, grabbed Yong's luggage and firmly ordered him inside, commenting that it was very cold outside. Without further ado, they led him into his new home. Thus, unexpectedly but warmly, Yong ended up living with his mother's friend and her daughter. In the present, Yong was savoring the delicious breakfast the maid had carefully prepared. As he enjoyed each bite, he felt grateful for the kindness and hospitality of these women, who had welcomed him into their home as if he were part of the family. "Don't you have in-person classes?" Yuna asked. Intrigued, without losing her composure, her daughter replied with a smile, saying that even in webtoons, attendance wasn't necessary. Yuna started to wander in her thoughts, thinking that all this technology and new ways of studying were very complicated for her. With a pensive expression, she turned to the protagonist and asked how the stew was, and if he found it to have a strange taste. Yong, always polite, responded that it was delicious, thanking her for every bite. The person in front of Jong was his mother's friend, Aunt Yuna. Although it was a request from a close friend, Haeseong wondered if she owed his mother any favor, trying to understand why she had taken him in so kindly. However, he quickly dismissed that thought, concluding that couldn't be the case, and that Aunt Yuna was just a good-hearted person, always willing to help. Well, aside from being kind-hearted, she's also an angel fallen from the sky, Haeseong thought, admiring Yuna's kindness and beauty. An angel, an angel, an angel. The protagonist stammered, his eyes wider than soup plates, unable to look away from Yuna's generous breasts. Unable to resist, the protagonist dove into a sea of fantasies about Yuna, seeing her as beautiful as a spring flower. He drooled, imagining 1,001 scenarios with beautiful Yuna as the star of his thoughts. Nayeon, sitting right in front of him, noticed within 2 seconds that the protagonist's head was in the clouds. Without a second thought, and discreetly, Nayeon stretched her leg under the table. She made contact and started massaging the protagonist's lower part. The effect was instant. He felt as though he'd been plugged into an electrical socket. A jolt ran through his body from top to bottom, and after what felt like an eternity, he collapsed onto the table, completely embarrassed. Yuna, looking startled, seemed more concerned than a first-time mother. Meanwhile, Nayeon, as calm as ever, announced she was going to school, acting as if nothing had happened. The protagonist couldn't help but think that his friend only resembled her mother in looks, as she didn't have a shred of sweetness or consideration. Nayeon was about to leave the house for university when, suddenly, she heard her mother call her with an urgent tone. She stopped abruptly, turning on her heels, and upon looking back, she realized her mother, Yuna, was holding a bento in her hands. Visibly nervous, Yuna started stammering as she offered the bento to her daughter. "I made steamed chicken," she said with a trembling voice, "and I thought maybe you'd like to take it with you for the day." Her mother's offer seemed like a sincere attempt to show affection, though the tension in the air was palpable. The relationship between mother and daughter didn't seem to be at its best, and this small interaction appeared to reflect the emotional distance between them. The protagonist, Yong, who was present during the scene, watched silently, noting the awkwardness of the situation. Later on, he would have to play a crucial role in trying to resolve this friction and help improve the relationship between Yuna and her daughter. Nayeon, blushing and a little uncomfortable, didn't quite know how to react to her mother's offer. With a mix of gratitude and shyness, she took the bento from Yuna's hands and thanked her, albeit a bit hesitantly. Yong, who was also present, observed the scene and approached to say goodbye to his aunt with a polite smile, thanking her for her hospitality. Just before he left, Yuna, still visibly worried, called out Yong's name with an expression full of both affection and seriousness. "Take care of my daughter," she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. The protagonist, smiling, bid farewell to Yuna as he left the house, promising he would take good care of Nayeon, without knowing in what way. As they walked to school together, the fresh morning air accompanied them. Nayeon, with a curious look and a slight smile on her lips, asked her Oppa if he had a girlfriend. She reminded him that the second semester was about to end and asked if there was any girl he was interested in. The protagonist, looking at the ground as they walked, responded that he had been so busy lately with his studies and adjusting to his new life in the city that he hadn't had a minute to think about having a girlfriend. Upon hearing his response, Nayeon, with a disdainful expression, reminded him that he had said the same thing the previous year. She told him not to let his youth slip by while being immersed in his studies, suggesting that he needed to balance studying with some fun and socializing. Isn't that normal for university students? The protagonist asked, somewhat confused by her advice. Nayeon responded with a slightly mocking smile that while it was important to study, it was also essential to enjoy university life, spend time with friends, and meet new people. University guys should have a lot of fun too, Nayeon concluded, emphasizing her point. Various scenes unfolded on the university campus, showing groups of students walking in pairs along tree-lined paths. Amid this bustle, the protagonist looked around and felt sad as he noticed he was the only one completely immersed in his studies, while others enjoyed their time with their partners. Suddenly, Nayeon's attention was drawn to a couple who seemed to break away from the main group, heading toward a more secluded corner of the campus hidden among the vegetation. Unable to help himself, the protagonist wondered if they were looking for privacy to share something more than just a walk. Nayeon, with a determined expression and a hint of mischief in her eyes, hinted that a noble person must always seek the truth behind things, suggesting she was willing to discover exactly what the couple was doing in that secluded spot. The couple, now in a hidden corner of the campus, was enjoying their time together. The scene was a mix of soft laughter and loving whispers as they immersed themselves in their small oasis of intimacy. The protagonist, watching from a safe distance, felt even more disheartened. The injustice of the situation hit him hard, as while others enjoyed their youth and love without restrictions, he felt trapped in an endless cycle of studying and responsibility. Yong was observing the scene with a mix of fascination and embarrassment, his face visibly reddening. Nayeon, standing beside him, whispered with a mischievous smile that despite the uncomfortable situation, there was quite an interesting view. Curiosity and unease started playing with Yong's nerves as he wondered if it was possible for people so dedicated to studying to also find ways to have fun intensely, just like those now in front of them. As erotic sounds and moans began to fill the air, an atmosphere charged with intimacy and desire took over, making both Yong and Nayeon blush in unison. Nayeon, her face still flushed and slightly stammering, tried to keep her composure. Pretending not to be affected by the situation, she asked Yong to stop watching and suggested they leave before getting caught. Nayeon noticed something that completely surprised her. Yong's little friend, which had been inactive until then, had woken up and was clearly reacting to the stimulating scene in front of them. The couple in the corner was so immersed in their activities that the intensity of what they were doing was almost indescribable. John and Nayeon were left stunned by everything they had witnessed. The scene was far more intense than they had imagined. Later, John and Nayeon entered their classroom with their cheeks still burning with embarrassment, trying to hide the deep blush that overtook them. They couldn't avoid the awkward silence between them and refrained from mentioning the scene they had witnessed. Thus begins the story of John, a young man who, by a twist of fate and unexpected circumstances, finds himself living in Seoul at the house of his mother's friend. The question arises, will he manage to maintain a calm and orderly life, or will he succumb to the desires and temptations that seem to be part of the dynamic in his new home with the girls living with him? To find out how events will unfold and which direction John's life will take, you'll need to dive into the reading of this work. The story bears the intriguing title, Secret Your Mom, promising a plot full of surprises and unexpected twists. Before signing off, this humble servant reminds viewers not to forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive alerts for future videos. The invitation is to stay up to date with every new release and not miss any updates until the next edition, where you'll continue to discover more fascinating stories.